Ma'am, now we can see it.
All right. So I can go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So technology sometimes trips us, but doesn't matter. We should go on. Now, most importantly, what I would like to give as a preamble or as an introduction to my presentation is why do we need this kind of a webinar with regard to writing a research paper? Most often what happens is, in my experience as a teacher or as a professor of English and as a research guide, what I find is that most of us struggle to format a research paper. Most of us are all over the place trying to put in everything that is possible, everything that we've read, and most often our research paper appears to be some kind of a cut, copy, paste, or a much more glorified or a dignified collage, collage or bits and pieces of things that we feel are related to what we would like to share. Now, and that's why most of our students, especially when they go abroad or when they present their research papers to reviewers abroad or outside their own contexts, they fail to make an impression. They fail to make an impression because there is no logic, there is no sequencing of their ideas. And we've not been taught how to present our written work in the most logical fashion. So therefore, that's the reason why we need to look at how we format a research paper, and what are the aspects that we need to look at when we present a research paper, especially to our reviewers, or especially when we go in for publication, or when we want to make an impact, or when we want to make an impression about our ideas. So that's why I felt that this is important, because this is the way I learned from my own guide, PhD guide, Dr. Francis M. Peter at Loyola College. So he was the one who initiated me into how best you can put up a research paper. All right, so I'll give you an outline of my talk this morning, and that is what the first slide is about. So I'm going to look at pre-writing strategies, then I'm going to look at writing strategies. And when I'm doing the writing strategies, I'll be looking at four aspects. One is the thesis statement, the next is the outline of the essay, the third is the essay or the research paper that you're putting up. And fourth is the abstract. The third part of my presentation will be with regard to revision strategies. What are those strategies that are needed to revise one's paper after we have written it? So let's go forward. Now, with regard to pre-writing strategies, please remember that writing is not a task that can be done on the spur of the moment. Now, in order to write, we need to read as much as is possible. And the question that comes to our minds will be, what do we read? How much do we read? The answer to that question is, well, if a topic is given, our life is easy, because there is that topic, and this happens with assignments or with seminars or with paper presentations. A topic is given, thrust areas are given, a narrower thrust area is given, focus area is given. So the topic is already presented. When that happens, life is very easy. Now, what do we do? Do we read only those aspects or those papers, scholarly journals or books or articles with regard to that particular topic that argues in favor of that topic? Definitely not. Read something that goes against the grain of that topic, that goes contrary to that topic, that critiques or that objectively looks at the shortcomings of that particular topic or the writing about that topic. I emphasize on reading with the grain and against the grain of the topic, because I want, that is where the moment between, or the space between for and against, is where you'll identify the gap, or in other words, your particular idea or your singular or unique idea that you need to develop. So, once again, let me emphasize that when you're reading, it's not reading in order to collect it and then organize it in a very logical sequence. That's not what research is about. Research is developing and elaborating your unique idea, the idea that you have gained as a result of your experiences, as a result of your reflection, your introspection, and then you are arriving at a hunch, or you're arriving at a particular insight which you would like to share with others, which is what brings me to the next reviewing whatever we read. So spend a lot of time reading. When you're asked to write about a particular topic, read as much as is possible. For my PhD students, I set them reading tasks for about a year and a half, and they have to provide abstracts of whatever they've read. So reading is absolutely important. You have to fill the pond in order to enjoy the benefits of the pond, or in order to enjoy the life of the pond. So the mind works on the basis of that same analogy. You fill it with a lot of inputs, and then you try to reap the benefits of insights that you gain after reading. I'm also reminded of what my guide used to tell me always. You are standing on the shoulders of giants to get a clearer view of the horizon. So, writing is incomplete without the reading to back up. So, what does review mean? After you read, you need to review. You need to review whatever you've read. And review for me takes the form of abstracts of whatever I've read, abstracts, or you talk about the main idea in that particular article that you've read, in that scholarly journal, in any of the primary or the secondary sources that you've read. Now that brings me to ask you this question. When I talk about secondary sources, most of you are researchers, so I think it's redundant on my part to talk about what are secondary sources. So I'll answer the question myself. Secondary sources are all that whatever is written with regard to a text, or with regard to that.
Annie, ma'am. Annie,
Yes, sir.
ma'am, we
Oh,
cannot hear you. Annie, ma'am. Annie, ma'am. Ma'am, your audio is muted. Annie, ma'am, unmute your audio. Yeah, ma'am is rejoining shortly. Not a technical issue. Somebody has muted, I think. So again, ma'am is rejoining the session. Ma'am?
Okay, audible now.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, now let me go back to my slide. I need to, yeah, can you view my slide now?
No, ma'am, again you need to present the slide, ma'am, here.
Yeah, 1 second. No, I'm having a problem now. Wait. Are you able to see my slide? No.
Dear participants, we are trying to share the slides for you, and the ma'am will join the session now.
Where is my You're here. I'll end the slide. Where will you get? Okay, I'll end. Yeah. Window.
Ma'am, you please continue. We will share you the
Yeah,
screen now.
can you just start the slide? See, I don't have power at home right now. It's just gone off. So I'm using a torch.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Am I visible?
Yes, ma'am, we can see you.
Yeah, so you can start with the slide. And I'll tell you to go to the next slide.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. One
Okay.
second.
No, I'm fine. So, Kalai, just start with the slide, the first slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a problem? Will it stay for some time? We'll keep one here also. What is happening here?
Ma'am, actually, the slides are getting downloaded. Could you please give us few minutes, ma'am?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you inform the participants as well.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
You can't give another connection. Want me to try sharing the screen? No need. It's really irritating thing. Why people are leaving me? Okay, so can I start?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, before that, let me confirm with the participants. Participants, can you see the slide? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so
Yes.
I'll go ahead. I'll start with the first. Maybe from the beginning you were not able to hear me, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll go to that this pre-writing strategies. I think that's where we got stuck. So I told you about reading primary and secondary sources, reading in favor of the topic and going against the grain of the topic. And what is important in the reading is there should be a constant process of reviewing, and where we need to understand that new topics are very rare. So what is new about research, or what is new about the topic that you would like to talk about? And for me, the angle is particularly important. When I talk about the angle, what I mean is that particular insight that you have gained after a lot of reading, and also that perspective that you have brought about, or that insight that you have gained through a lot of your reading. And then you identify the purpose. Do you want to argue that particular point? Do you want to analyze? Do you want to study, elaborate, explore? So these are the various ways in which one understands the purpose of one's writing. Now we need to reflect on our reading in order to form that unique idea with regard to the given topic. Now I have identified three foolproof methods of reflection or forming one's unique idea. The first one is concept mapping. There are any number of techniques, or there are any number of strategies, pre-writing strategies, to understand what is that unique idea. I've chosen three of those, of the number of strategies which have worked for me and which I have shared in my classes. The first one is concept mapping. When we talk about concept mapping, it is about the idea. You put that singular idea or the topic in the center of your page, draw a circle around it, and then draw branches to that particular single central idea. And what you need to do is also write out related topics or related ideas with regard to that central idea. Now, from that secondary branch, go to the tertiary branch, and from there, move on, and everything gets related to the concept or that central concept that you have spoken about. Now, when you do that, we'll also realize that there is some kind of a pattern, there is some kind of a pattern that emerges, and there are some ideas that are stronger than the others. Take the strongest idea and draw a second concept mapping by drawing or by making subsidiary ideas to that main idea. So this is the concept. This is what is referred to as concept mapping. A second strategy that has worked for me is free writing, where when you get a topic, when you arrive at a topic, you write. It is some kind of a free association. You write as much as is possible, write sentences or phrases or clauses with regard to that central topic or with regard to that topic, and then keep writing. Do not bother about logical sequencing. Do not bother about some kind of a referencing. It is all these are insights that come to your mind. It is free writing. And then you'll realize that again a pattern emerges. You feel strongly about a particular idea and you chase that idea. You go, you give it some kind of a greater reading or a greater reflection, and you'll realize that your idea emerges. The third strategy that we would like to look at is brainstorming, or what is referred to as listing down. Now, here we're not writing in full sentences, or we're not composing our ideas into sentences or clauses or phrases, but brainstorming can be one single word, and or it could be various influences that storm our minds as we reflect on our reading. Make a list, and then again a pattern emerges as to what is that prominent idea that you would like to look at. Can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, Kalai, just one slide at a time. Huh? Okay. Yeah. So this is we are now entering writing strategies. What do we need to look at when we are writing on a particular topic? The most important aspect of writing is formulating the thesis statement. Now, I would like to look at the thesis statement as not a question. It isn't a question. It isn't an opinion. And it isn't an impression. Now, I'll explain why I say it should not be a question, it should not be an opinion, or it should not be an impression. A question mostly becomes a rhetorical question when we are formulating the argument or the thesis. An opinion or an impression cannot be defended. It is always debatable. It is always, somebody will have a contrary opinion or somebody will have a different impression with regard to the same topic. So what I mean is, when you're writing the thesis statement, it has to be an argument, and an argument that can be convincing because of the presence or the strength of its evidences, the number of evidences that you've collected. So in other words, a thesis statement is a complete sentence. It's neither a phrase nor a clause. So much of the difficulty that comes for a researcher in framing a thesis statement is it is not a complete sentence. Now, when it is not a complete sentence, it does not work as an argument. It has to be complete. There has to be the subject, predicate. The sense has to be complete. Another way of looking at the thesis statement is it is an answer to the question that is raised. So you need to raise a research question, and the thesis answers that particular research question. We can also look at it as a stand or a point of view or a perspective that you've taken with regard to a controversy, or with regard to a debate, with regard to a discussion. Finally, a thesis statement is an argument to prove or disprove the position that has been taken. So therefore, the meaning of the word thesis is argument, and this argument that can be proved or disproved with validating evidences. All right. So we'll take a break over here, and then I want you to look at this topic that I have raised: mental health during the pandemic. I want the participants to write a thesis statement with keeping in mind all those guidelines that I have given. mental health during the pandemic. I'm not making up your mind. I'm not telling you what is it about mental health. You have to decide, and we'll take about 5 minutes to frame this thesis statement. I'll ask Mrs. Kalaivani to give me samplings of the thesis statement towards the 12th or the 13th slide as we go along.
Participants, the key speaker has given us a time of 5 minutes, so you can give your thesis statement in the chat box. May I get a confirmation from participants yet?
Ma'am, can you come again with the broad field that you have given to us?
I think the exercise was not clear. What I want you to do is write out a thesis statement with regard to this topic that I have given you, mental health during the pandemic.
Yeah, the topic is already given for us, mental health during the pandemic, and the participants, we need to write a thesis statement.
Okay, Kalai, shall we move on? Because they can continue writing as they listen also.
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, so the next slide, please. All right. Now, again, we are dealing with writing strategies. We need to pay attention to the formatting of the essay or the writing. So I would like to, at the outset, I would like to tell you that any good paper, any good research paper consists of 5 parts. Now, earlier on, this is a joke that I love to repeat in my classes. Whenever we are taught to write, especially a formal essay, our teachers tell us about 3 parts: introduction, body, conclusion. Now, take any language. In Tamil, I've done this Tamil exam, so I know how an essay is written in Tamil. Munnurai, Katturai, Mudivurai. All right. So, sorry for my bad pronunciation in Tamil, but I think I can manage. So, these are the 3 parts. Now, I would like to extend these 3 parts into 5 parts. So, of the 5 parts, the first part is what is referred to as the introduction. All right, so the introduction over here, and I'm going to talk about how the outline is written. First, we go to the outline, and then we move into how an essay is written. So, in the outline, that is the first part. The first part is definitely the introduction. Now, in the introduction, this introduction has to be divided into 5 to 6 parts. First is we need to understand, or we need to talk about the context or the background of the issue or of the topic to be studied. Now, when I talk about background, it does not mean a historical perspective, or it does not mean some kind of an already known background. What is that background that you have agreed to study, that you want to explore? So it is that context, or it is that background pertaining to your particular perspective with regard to that topic that you have to look at. Now, once you identify the context or the background of the issue, we need to identify what exactly is that issue. Why do we need to study it, and what is that particular issue, or what that particular narrow focus of that topic is? After we do that, raise the research question. I was also told, when I was doing my research, I was told that the research question has to be a very fundamental question. Most often it has to work with how, why, what, where, when. So these are the issues that you have to look at. A very fundamental question that can allow for answers. Once the research question is raised, we need to formulate the thesis statement. And I told you in my earlier slide how a thesis statement has to be formulated. Now, how are we going to study this argument that is presented? How are we going to study this particular argument or this perspective that we have gained on the topic that has been given to us? We need to provide the approach. What is the approach that we are looking at? Is it a sociological approach? Is it a psychological approach? Is it a historical approach? Or is it a validatory method that we are looking at? And then we'll have to look at the methodology, or when you're writing a research paper, when you're writing a paper to be presented, I look at methodology as three relevant but distinct reasons that will support your thesis statement. So if we look backwards, we need to look at how everything is interrelated. We have three reasons that will strengthen our thesis statement, which is an answer to the research question in order to study that particular perspective about that topic against the background for which this topic has been raised. So this back and forth process has to be understood as a strategy in order to get a very good introduction. So introduction is not just saying what you're going to study about. You're going to provide some kind of a roadmap or some kind of a minutiae of what your study is about with regard in this particular introduction. So if you're writing an essay, an academic essay of 5 parts, the first paragraph should be this introduction, where the introduction carries all these details. If it is a thesis that you're presenting, the introductory chapter should carry all these details that you are studying. Kalai, let's go to the next slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the second, third, and the fourth paragraphs are an elaboration. I refuse to call it body of the essay, but I would prefer to call it as elaboration of the introduction that has happened. Now, once the introduction is clear, remember the last part of the introduction is where you present three arguments that are relevant and that are distinct, that have that are not rephrasing of the same idea, but they are distinctly apart, but they are relevant and they tie up with the thesis statement. So we have the second paragraph, the third paragraph, and the fourth paragraph, or the second chapter, third chapter, and the fourth chapter. Now, what is important is the second paragraph has the first reason and its own evidence. Now, here I've made it very brief because it is a slide. The first reason has to be elaborated. Say what the reason is. Analyze the reason completely. And provide evidence. Provide evidence either from the text that you're studying or from the phenomenon that you're exploring. And these evidences can also be text-based, and it also can be a little more validated with the help of other scholarly scholars, or with the contribution of other scholars. Now, when you are looking at other scholarly contribution, pay attention to giving credit to people for because you're borrowing their ideas, you're quoting their ideas, you're borrowing their ideas. You need to give credit with name and publishing details. I'll explain how that is done later when we do in-text citation and documentation protocol. But please remember, each of these evidences are again unique to that particular reason. We can't have the same evidence for all the three reasons. So first reason has its own evidence, second reason has its own very singular evidence, and the fourth has its own evidence. If you compile many evidences and distinct but relevant evidence, your study gets stronger and stronger. And it will not have this kind of a lack of validation or a lack of authentication of what you're trying to say or what you're trying to argue or prove. So please remember that the second, third, and the fourth actually is the content, is the very important, or the pivot on which your research resides or your academic paper resides. Make it very exhaustive and relevant and also absolutely to the point. If you do not have anything, any reason to say, or you don't have an evidence to strengthen your reason, it means that the reason does not have enough weight, enough weightage. So throw out that reason and find out another reason by which you can argue out, or you can strengthen or prove your thesis statement. Next slide, please. So after doing the introductory part, that is the first part, the second, third, and the fourth part, let's move on to conclusion. When you're writing the fifth paragraph or the fifth chapter, especially for an academic essay or a research essay, the fifth part is conclusion, the concluding paragraph that one has to write. Again, it is divided into 5 parts. See to it that your conclusion has all these 5 parts. You summarize the study, restate the thesis. Now, when you're restating the thesis, take care that you do not copy out the same thesis statement. You can rephrase the thesis statement, keeping in mind the relevance, the accuracy of the argument. The third part of your conclusion is you are discussing the findings. You have to discuss your findings and over there learn to prioritize. What is that most important finding as a result of your study? And thus go down, prioritize it, and learn to present the greater focus for the strongest finding that you have. After that, you identify your unique insight. That is your contribution as a researcher or as a presenter. Identify your unique insight. And then what you need to do is, the last part is drop new directions for future researchers. This is the format of the outline. So please remember that an essay cannot be written without an outline. The first and the principle behind writing a good essay is formulating the outline. And what I've dealt with over here is the outlining of an essay. Now, this has to be fleshed out, or this has to be written by providing all these guidelines in the outline, and that's where you make your essay. That's how you format your essay. So pay attention to the outline. Outline has to be very clear, without any mistake or without any kind of vagueness or ambivalence. And then after your guide or after your reviewer approves of the outline, you can go ahead and flesh the outline out into a well-written essay. Now, most often an essay is found to be wanting or found to be lacking in quality because it does not follow this kind of a formatting. It does not follow a logical sequencing of the ideas that we have. We go all over the place and we become so emotional in our outpouring of our perspectives and our ideas that we do not have a sense of control. There is no academic discipline. I feel and I'm certain about this fact that it is the outline that creates or brings this sense of academic discipline into our writing skills. Kalai, next slide, please. So here is the approaches when we start writing our research paper. There are various approaches to writing a research paper. We can either have the argumentative approach where we are persuading or trying to convince our reviewers or our readers about our particular point of view. So it becomes persuasive. We need to persuade or convince another person about our particular insight. And that is what is the argumentative essay. You take a stand and you argue in favor or against that stand. You are trying to convince your readers. The second approach is the analytical. Now, when we talk about the analytical, it is a very objective presentation of everything that is present, that is there as a result of your reading. When we do literary analysis, for example, a text, we cut the parts or of the text, or we cut the text into an analytical understanding. So we look at what is the plot or how the plot is developed. We look at character sketch. We look at the theme. We look at the diction or the stylistic features. These are the various parts that comprise the entire text. And then maybe the literary theory or validate the literary theory. So this is what is referred to as analysis or an analytical approach to writing, where various features or various factors or parts of a particular writing or a phenomenon is discussed objectively, absolutely objectively. The next approach is comparison and contrast. And as of all of us know, comparing is comparing of similarities, and contrasting is contrasting the differences that are present. Then the third approach is deductive inductive. Deductive, as we all know, is testing an existing theory. Inductive is developing a theory. So I would simplify it a little further and say deductive is from the general, we move on to the specific. And the inductive is when we move from the specific in order to arrive at a general idea or a generalization. Next slide, please. This is important as we as we format our academic essay or research essay. What are the features of language that we need to look at? We need to be very simple and clear. There should not be a show of language power or prowess, because in today's world, all of us are busy. We need to be very clear in our presentation, and it's best to use simple language that works for us. Now, my suggestion would be when we compose a sentence, we need to evaluate that sentence. Every sentence has to be evaluated for its simple logic and clear understanding. That's what I mean by simple, clear language. Simple in its logic, it has to flow from point A to point Z without any kind of hitches. And the understanding, the reader should understand what we are trying to say. So in the olden days, I mean, when I was doing my MPhil in 88, there was this use of flowery language, a lot of quotation. All that is pretty dated. Today, it is a very business-like, it is a very clear format that is used for writing an academic essay or a research essay. When we say clear and simple language, we need to have effective sentences. Do not use sentences that are impressive, but use language that is expressive. You need to express your idea. You don't need to impress someone else with your writing skills or with your language prowess. So it has to be effective, and that's what I mean by saying weigh every sentence that you write. Don't do this revision right at the end. After composing every sentence, see to it that the sentence works. And how do you know that the sentence works? Always use the thesis statement. Am I in focus? Am I doing something? Am I pushing the thesis statement, or am I pushing my argument a little further with this particular sentence? And am I keeping my focus straight? So that is very important, and that is what I mean by effectiveness of the sentence. Does that sentence work with regard to that topic that you've identified, with regard to the perspective that you have delineated? The tone that we need to use is rather formal and serious. It's not a conversational tone, or it's not an informal tone that we have to keep in mind. Formal, serious tone, because you mean serious business. It is you need to use this to convince another person. You need to use that language and the words that you use in a very formal setting. Now, the fourth feature that I would like to emphasize is transition. It's not enough if we have this fantastic outline and start writing. We need to transit from the idea in the introduction to the second paragraph, and from the second, we need to transit to the third, and from the third to the fourth, and finally to the conclusion. So we need words or phrases of transition. You can also have ideas as transition where the introduction concludes or tries to introduce the idea in the second paragraph, and thus it goes on. So in other words, an essay is a cohesive whole. It is not, the paragraphs within the essay are not isolated beings or entities. On the whole, the essay has to be a cohesive being, entity that is connected either idea wise or language wise. So you can do it two ways. Thematically, you can connect it, or you can connect it syntactically. You can use stylistic features. One of the stylistic features that we need to use in order to help the transition of ideas is signal words. Use a lot of signal words. When you read scholarly journals, you would have come across words such as therefore, in addition to, as a consequence of, then the other famous ones, firstly, secondly, thirdly. Please don't use it very sparingly. But there are any number of signal words that you can make use of. Signal the transition of the paragraph using these words. It's important that you have to use these signal words for transition of thought. As I've always told you, the thesis statement, focus of the thesis statement has to be maintained. And that is one of those very important features of research essays or academic essays. The thesis, the other day I was at a conference, I was talking to a group of researchers at Hindustan Institute of Technology, Kelambakam. And one of those students, very bright students, a boy said, "Ma'am, definition for thesis is it is a radar." I would like to use that particular analogy. A thesis is your radar till you finish with the study. So it is a radar whereby it governs or it disciplines you into maintaining that focus, sustaining that focus, and uh, looking at that focus as your main trajectory. Now, other features of language, this is where I'm going to come to in-text citation and end paper documentation. For different disciplines, we have different style sheets or methods of citation and documentation. For English language literature, we use MLA Handbook, 8th edition, that is the latest. For social sciences, mostly it is APA 7, also the Chicago Manual, the 16th edition. Each of these, I'm not going into detail. It is there out in the world. The knowledge is available. We just need to Google and find out what are these various protocols. But please remember that your essay is much better, stronger, and absolutely effective if we have citations, in text citations, and references that are given at the end as end paper documentation. Uh, Earlier on, we would call it bibliography, then we used to call it works cited, we call it references. So it's better not to use the term bibliography, either references or works cited, whatever these handbooks or style sheets tell us, because we have to be careful about what is the recent change that has been made in these handbooks or style sheets. Next slide, please. All right, so now let's take a break over here. We are going to the last part of writing strategies, and that is the abstract. How many lines? This is again a question for the participants. You can type your answers, and Kalai will tell me what are those answers. So till then, retain the slide. Don't go to the next slide. How many lines should an effective abstract consist of? You can guess. Just give me in absolute numbers. You can type. No, I don't want words. I want lines. How many lines? Okay, 10
So
lines.
Rekha Kumari says 5,
Okay, 7
Pritika
lines,
5
10
to
to 12
10.
lines. I'm able to read what is coming. 8 to 10, 6 to
Okay,
7,
ma'am.
150 words, 5 lines, 10 lines, 12 lines. Oh my God. So if you take an average of this, it's somewhere between 10 to 15 lines that most people are talking about. Okay. Again, some people are talking about words. I'm only talking about lines. Okay, okay, fine, fine, fine. Accepted. Most of you are saying it has to be between 15 to 10 to 15 lines. No, it isn't so elaborate. It just has to have 6 lines. So all those who got 6 only as an answer, give yourself a tap on your back. Great, Visalakshi and Karishma and so many others who said 6 lines. So it has to be only 6 lines. Let's see what this abstract, how does this abstract behave in these 6 lines. Kale, the next slide. Next slide, please, Kale.
Yes, ma'am, I'm presenting, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So the 6 lines, what are these 6 lines? And the first line, please don't take it as part of the 6 lines. This is the formatting of the abstract. Now, once again, if your introduction is very clear, if you've done a very honest job with regard to your introduction, the abstract is simply a cakewalk. So we need to look at your introduction and your conclusion together gives you the abstract. So first and foremost, the first line is the problem location. What is the gap? What is the gap that you have located? What is the issue? What is the that particular perspective to the topic that you have looked at? The problem location. What is your argument or what is your thesis? How are you going to study this particular argument, or how are you going to validate this particular thesis statement? And what is your method of data collection and data analysis? The fourth line is the delimitation. Now, most often people, my students say, oh, delimitation, ma'am, are you saying that my research is weak or it is not strong? Is it a limitation? Is it a shortcoming? No, that is not the meaning of the word delimitation. Delimitation is actually drawing up the boundary of your research. You need to drop the boundary of your research. This is my cohort. This is that context in which I'm studying. These are the methods that I'm using. This will be the test that I'll administer. And this is the period that I'm studying. So you are limiting, you're drawing up the boundaries of your research. So actually, in actual fact, your delimitation becomes the strengthening of your research. Why I'm saying why do I use the word strengthening of your research is because it is only when you delimit your research that focus will be maintained and there will be greater focus for the reviewers or for people listening in on you. When somebody asks you a question outside the limits or the boundaries of your research, you can immediately thank them for that valuable advice and say that you will proceed with it in your postdoctoral or in another paper. That gives you a future direction. So delimitation is rather important for the strength of our research. And after that, the findings, again, from the conclusion, the findings that you've gained, and definitely the new directions for future researchers. These are the 6 lines in how many ever words. It's important to identify them as lines. And again, the lines must connect one to the other. So it's important that we look at the abstract, the formatting of the abstract from this particular process or in this particular sequence or logic. Now, something that we have to keep reminding ourselves is abstract is that which is written at the end of the work. At the end, after you finish your work, after you finish your analysis and everything, when you write your conclusion, that's when the abstract comes into being, not before that. But you locate the abstract right at the beginning of your paper as a small paragraph. When you begin your paper, that's where you locate it, you position it. But the writing happens only after the work is over. So you have to remember this logic. It's not as though we write an abstract first and then write the paper. The abstract, the outline has to be written first, then the essay, and then the abstract. I hope we've understood this. So can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes, ma'am. I'll present you the next slide now.
Now, if the next slide is the model, revision strategies. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
So we've come to the third part of the presentation, and that is revision strategies. Now, after you've written your outline, you've written your essay, and you've written your abstract. Everything is clear. And but then we need to revise. I told you, as you're composing sentences, we need to revise. Now, at the end of our work, we need to go back and then find out what are those revision strategies that we have to keep in mind. It's important that we look at revising and editing and going over and over whatever we've written. Now, something that we need to keep in mind as researchers or as writers of research papers is do not fall in love with your own writing. Do not fall in love with your own writing. When you fall in love with your own writing, it is a trap. And as human beings, we need to get out of traps. We cannot really get into a trap knowingly and with your eyes wide open. Please avoid that trap of falling in love with your own writing. Be ruthless. One of those strategies that I've used in my classes, even at the postgraduate level, where I teach for MSc Psychology, the postgraduate students of MSc Psychology and MSc Nutrition and Dietetics, This is what I tell them. You write, don't try to compose immediately, reflect. After you write, go back, revise. And if you feel something is not right, if your work is not good enough, strike it out, tear the paper, throw it in the dustbin, which means there is a closure to that experience of writing or experience of composing something. It is painful, but we need to do it. We need to ruthlessly critique our own writing. It's much better if we critique our own writing rather than our reviewers pointing out and saying, "What is this that you've given?" It's such a shame for us. So tear the paper out, throw it into the dustbin, keep a dustbin nearby, throw it out, chuck it, and then start the process all over again. It helps to revise. Now, what are those features that we need to revise? There are two features. One is mechanics and the other is grammar. What are the mechanics of writing? Very simply, or very in a simplified manner, I've looked at 4 areas. Your handbook, your style sheets should give you a whole lot of other mechanics of writing that you have to keep in mind. But these are the common problem areas that I'm looking at. One is spellings. Are we following the American spelling, British spelling, and Indian spelling is a world altogether? But then, is there consistency in your spellings? Are you accurate in your spellings? The punctuation, most of us have a problem with apostrophes, with hyphens, dashes, colon, semicolon. It is such a difficult world. So punctuation and then quotation. When do you use the single quote? When do you use the double quote? When do you use the single quote? Within the double quote, capitalization, what are those words that are capitalized? Now, then let me come to the second one. When we look at grammar, English grammar, which is a foreign language for all of us, many of us, we need to look at parts of speech, types of sentences, structuring of the sentences. Are we looking at only simple sentences? When we write only simple sentences, one subject, one predicate, the problem, the reading of such papers become very tedious, and the style is not good enough for a researcher. So try to use many complex sentences, some compound sentences, and very few simple sentences. Ideas should be simple, language should be simple, I agree. But then, even when you use complex sentences, you can combine and express your ideas in a very simple, logical manner. Now, for your grammar and for your mechanics of writings, I would also like you to go to your basic grammar book. I prefer, even though people debunk or balk at the process of my using Renan Martin, I prefer going to Renan Martin because that is something that I learned my language, I learned my English grammar and mechanics of writing. So I go there and I quickly check whether my sentences are right. So it is grammar and mechanics of writing that we have to look at when we revise our written work. The third aspect that we should revise is definitely the organization and correlation of ideas. Is our writing organized? And that's why I have to reiterate that the outline is one strategy that helps us organize our writing of an essay or a research paper or even a thesis. Have the ideas correlated one with the other, because if it is a 5-part essay or a dissertation that you're presenting, the ideas have to correlate from one to the other. Each chapter should not be seen as distinct and as closed. The idea has to be continued, and it is the thesis statement that helps us correlate our ideas. Therefore, is the writing coherent? Is it, can we understand it? Does it follow some kind of a grammar by itself, a writing grammar by itself? Does the whole work become a cohesive unit? These are important revision strategies that you have to look at. And much of this revision strategy is possible if we've read a lot, because a lot of reading helps us internalize good writing. And one of the ways to write well, is definitely to read good literature, very good writing. Take the newspaper, take the op-ed pages, take the editorial pages, something that all of us refuse to read. The middle part of any newspaper. Read scholarly articles written by very good writers, and the manner in which they present their ideas, the manner in which they're able to build an argument, that's important. So the more we read, the more we are able to internalize good language skills, good writing skills, and we know how to express our ideas in order to argue our case out, in order to analyze, or in order to correlate. All right. So these are the three aspects of writing skills or writing an effective paper, research paper, that I would like to look at. Can we have the Kalei? Can we have a sampling of the thesis statement?
Yes, ma'am. I'll read out the sampling now. Ma'am, let me read out the samplings, ma'am.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Naina Jadhav has written, the pandemic has adverse effects on the mental health. The
Okay.
pandemic has adverse effects on the mental health.
All right. I'll take one at a time, because then I'll be able to concentrate. Now, this
Oh,
is a thesis statement where it speaks, it is an opinion. It could be seen as an opinion, has adverse effects. I'm looking at it as an opinion because I have another contrary opinion. It does not have the pandemic does not have adverse effects on mental health. So how are you going to prove it? So it is an opinion. Where are the reasons to validate that particular perspective that you've gained? The second one.
yeah, the second one by Diksha Berman. Mental health issues among postgraduate students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mental health issues among postgraduate students during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, got it, got it. Here it does not read like a sentence. I earlier told you, it cannot be a cluster of phrases or clauses. So this does not read like a sentence. Where is the subject? Where is the predicate? So make it into a sentence, and then let's see. The next one.
Dr. Shrikant has written Pandemic and Beyond.
Okay, that is a clause, or a phrase. It isn't a sentence. Next.
Uma Rajesh has written Crisis Management through Positive Self-Communication.
Again, not a sentence. So these are problems that crop up. So pay attention to how a thesis has to be written into a sentence. It's not just an idea that one has gained, but then it is an argument that has to be written out in full sentence with its own reasons. So therefore, the reasons help us to prove or disprove the argument. And it is from that starting point that we have to look at. So I think we're also running out of time. So can we go to the next slide, Kalei?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Kalaya, are you presenting? Ah, that's it. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we're going back. Please put in the next slide.
Next slide, ma'am. Okay.
Yes. Now, for the sake of, I did not want to take the easy way out of presenting it. I've tried to give a model. And I, at the moment, don't like my writing. So I've fallen out of love with my writing. So I won't read it. I want you people to read it and spend some time looking at the manner in which I have drawn up an outline. This is the introduction, introductory paragraph. Next slide. Kalay, next slide.
Yes, ma'am, I'm presenting.
Yes. So this is again part of the outline, the second paragraph. And let me tell you that I've not followed this particular, the proper documentation protocol deliberately because I want you to do it on your own. Find out how it is done. But I've just given you the evidence that uh, I have arrived at in order to prove this particular reason. Next slide, please. This is the second reason in the third paragraph. Again, the reason, and we need to elaborate the reason with evidence. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is the third reason in the fourth paragraph. Now, this is the outline. It's only still the outline. When I'm writing it as an essay, I will build in my own elaboration of what I mean by resilience or inner strength in children, and how I'm going to argue it out with regard to this particular evidence that I have collected. Let's move on to the next slide, please. And my conclusion. All right, so I'd like you to present the next slide. And these are the references. It's not an exhaustive reference for want of space. And this is just to tell you that I've used a book, I've used some web sources. And when I was preparing these slides, I also used scholarly articles, which I have not presented over here. But then this is a sampling, a very, very basic sampling of the references that I have used in order to present these slides. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. And I've given my contact details, my email ID, and my phone. So if feel free to contact me in case you need further clarifications. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, participants, for being so cooperative and terrific. Thank you very much. Kalai, I've reached the end of my presentation. I think we can open it out for questions.
Question, yes, ma'am. So participants, if you have any question, please post it on the chat box.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Good
Good
morning, sir.
morning, sir.
Ma'am, I have seen the one book. Its name was Shashi Tharoor and Beyond. It was written like that. It was the book written by one of the scholar, Mr. Santosh. So it was Shashi Tharoor and Beyond. So I have also thought like that, pandemic and beyond. So now you are telling that the thesis statement should not be written in a phrase. So ma'am, how should be written like that? Or it means the book title should be written like that, or the book title should not be written like that too?
Okay, nice question. How I would like to look at this question is, the title can be, catchy. It can be a phrase. There's no issue with regard to that. I'm talking about the thesis statement, which is not the title. The thesis statement is a sentence. It is a complete sentence that presents your argument, and to a certain extent your approach and your methodology as to how you're going to do this, or how you're going to study this particular argument that you have espoused. Kalai, are you going to read the questions?
No, ma'am, actually that, okay. So one question by Geeta. What 10 should be used to write a thesis? What 10 should be used to write a
Okay.
thesis?
All right, that's a good question. Now, most often it is the past tense that we use, because we we have done a particular study and we are reporting that particular study. So it can be the reported speech, the past tense, that is used.
Hello.
Yes.
There is a question, ma'am, on my side also. I have done my research work on revolt in the poetry of Kamala Das, but I want to convert it into book form and I want to write that one, revolt and beyond. Is it possible or not?
No, I'm not. This particular writing, this particular webinar is with regard to how you format an essay.
Okay, not regarding
All
the whole
right.
thesis.
No, no, no. It is with regard to how do you format a research essay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
okay,
you.
thank.
Ma'am, there is a question from Karishma.
Uh, oh, there is another one. Should the thesis be written in third person? Shall I just take that question?
Okay,
Most
ma'am.
often, what is preferred is the third person, but then nowadays, the inclination is also to use the first person. I personally feel that the first person can be used if it is not related to your personal identity or your personal experience, but if it is a universalized experience. So rather than looking at a personal I, learn to use a universalized I or we. That would make it a little more authentic, because you're not just talking about your own personal experience from the point of view of a researcher.
There is a question by
Uh,
Meenakshi Shivakumar. What are the difference
okay,
between abstract and thesis statement? How to classify
okay.
abstract and thesis statement while writing a research paper?
All right. So thesis statement is an argument that you're proposing. You are proposing a thesis statement or an argument that can be validated, that can be proved or disproved. It is a perspective or a stand that you're taking with regard to a topic that is given or with regard to the topic that you have arrived at. Now, abstract is different because abstract does not have only the thesis statement. You're talking about how you arrived at the topic, give some kind of a background. You're going to talk about what are the findings as a result of your study. What are the new directions? What are the boundaries of your research? And what are the ways in which new researchers can pick up from your insights? So an abstract is a minutiae of your work, whereas the thesis is the starting point.
Ma'am, another question from Karishma. Can we add factual references of allusions?
How does it become an argument then when you're also providing the solution? That is a starting point, isn't it? So you can't really have solutions over there.
Next question from Ranjit Kumar. Which is better, bibliography or reference in writing research article?
It's better to use the term references. I've seen Western books or Western journals where they write references. Many Indian journals have works cited. But most often, I mean, the word bibliography nobody uses these days.
Next question from Rekha Kumari. What should be the size of the thesis?
Okay, so that depends on your university. Madras University says 250 pages, double space, and on one side, those various specifications are there. So if you're talking about an essay, a research essay or an academic essay, an effective essay is written in 1,500 words.
Next question from Kogila Krishnan. How to include the gist of a work of art in the initial part of the paper or could be presented side by side of the arguments?
Okay, so that is, again, we'll have to look at our own style sheets or our own documentation protocols according to our discipline. It is good if we are presenting an experimental work, a work based on experiment. It's best to use audiovisual aids in the form of graphs or charts or diagrams alongside the text. Otherwise, another option can be using it in the appendix, putting it in the appendix, writing out figure 1 or table 1, and then referring to it in the text or in the body of your work.
Next question by Meher Nisha. Can we call a thesis statement as hypothesis?
Why not? Yes. Because hypothesis is also the argument that you're presenting, which you need to validate.
Another question by Rekha Kumari. A good research paper should be of how many words?
That's what I just said. Again, the people who are calling for papers will give you some specifications. Sometimes I've written papers of 1,500 words or 3,000 words. Some also say 7,000 words. So one has to follow the specifications that are given. If you leave it to me, I will say that a very good research paper can be written on just one side of a sheet. When I was abroad and when I had to do some writing skills, my professor over there told me that, Annie, if you cannot express yourself on one side of a sheet, I don't think you can express yourself at all. We Indians, we love to write. I mean, in exams, we take great pleasure in getting as many additional booklets as possible, filling up pages. But then the answer papers that I read, that I review, when I see that it does not follow a logical stance or a logical sequencing of ideas, I mark them very low, because it's not the quantity that matters, it is the quality. How well are you able to express your ideas?
Next question from P. Divya Dinesh. Where should we include objectivity of the study, ma'am?
Yes. Now, when you're doing your, go back to your introductory paragraph or your introductory chapter, and over there, can you fit in your aims and objectives? Why are you studying this particular phenomenon? So the objectives, the aims and objective of carrying out can also be tied up with the approach and methodology. And it is over there that we also drop the significance of our study.
Then Zabila Sherlin has asked, ma'am, what is research hypothesis?
Research hypothesis is the argument that you base your research on, that central argument. And in social sciences, you can look at alternate hypothesis or the null hypothesis. We need to go elaborately into all that.
Ma'am, one of the participants has asked when to use et al. While citing.
Et
Yes.
al. Yeah, that is again, it is also dated. Nowadays nobody uses et al. Style sheets have changed, and they have also told us that we don't really use it. Et al. Is used for, many more authors. This person plus so many others. And that's when we use the first person's name and write et al., which indicates that there is more than one author.
Ma'am, there is a next question, ma'am. What is the difference between paper and article?
Paper and
Article.
article. You mean article, newspaper article?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Newspaper article is journalistic in nature, and it is direct. It has a pertinent problem to address. Um, Most often, it may be an opinion that is elaborated, an impression that is elaborated with evidence, or a human interest story that is elaborated, which need not be a research paper. And there are many types of articles. There are feature articles. There are all kinds of articles, no, in a newspaper.
Ma'am, there is a question from the YouTube live. Actually, KP Srikala Ramkumar has posted this question. Please
Go ahead.
explain peer-reviewed journals and care listed.
Okay, peer-reviewed is where people of your standing review journals, or it is given to someone else. Now, we can also have the double-blind peer review, where it goes from one reviewer to the other. Nobody knows the name of the person, the identity of the person is totally blanked out, and therefore the objectivity of the reviewing happens. So peer review is formal, it is an official process which is undertaken to review a research paper. So it can be given to, it is given if there is a committee that looks at publications, research publications. The committee can decide or draw up a panel and give these papers to that particular panel. And if that does not suffice the intention, it can be given to the next. So there are panels that are drawn, panels that comprise people with erudition, people who are scholarly, and people who have published themselves in that particular field, experts in that particular field. It does not mean peer review does not necessarily mean giving it to your colleague who sits by your side, or your best friend, or somebody in the family. That is not peer review.
Next question by Vishnu Kumar. How long MPhil thesis should be written? And do we need to mention methodology while writing a thesis?
Yes, I'll take the second question. Methodology has to be written. That's where most of us find it difficult. We wonder why do we need to spell everything out? But then for the reviewer, it's important that we identify the roadmap of our thesis. And methodology is also important for us as researchers because we need to know that we are going to do something that has been mentioned. We are accountable to that process of methodology. What is the first question? I forget the first question, first part of the question.
How long a MPhil thesis should be written?
Okay, how long should an MPhil thesis? Now, some universities say 80 pages, some say 100, 150 pages. Again, it's totally dependent on your university, and it's better not to exceed too much. Say plus 10 pages or 20 pages won't make a big difference, but keep to that limit, page limit that the university prescribes.
Ma'am, one of the participants in YouTube live chat has posted the question. Uh,
Yeah.
is it possible to apply psychoanalysis theory on mental illness novels?
Why not? You should, but then also, do you have how can I say standing in understanding psychological theories? Are you trained? Do you have an extra qualification to look at psychological theories? Try to get help. But then, what is wrong in doing that? That becomes your approach. That becomes your theoretical framework.
Ma'am, another question from Chanter. Should reference be only cited works? Can we add books or articles that we have read which were useful?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, which is why references have this very subtle difference between works cited. Works cited are only, if you're using the word works cited, it means that you're going to give the bibliographical references or the publishing details of those works that you have cited in your text. References can be a little more exhaustive, but then do not have about 100 or 200, especially when you're writing your research paper, a paper to be published. What are those references that are related to your perspective or your topic? That's more important rather than giving an exhaustive list and filling up pages. But when you're presenting your dissertation, you have to give all that you have read and reviewed. There is that literature survey that you have to keep in mind as well.
Next question from GB. How many quotations can we add to our thesis?
Most often, the problem is, we when I review dissertation thesis, there are so many quotations all over the place, and then I wonder, oh my, this is some kind of a collage of this is some kind of a collage of quotations. Where is your own contribution? That's the problem that I have. So please limit those quotations. It's not a particular number. You cannot have 4 quotations in one page. You can have one, or there are other pages that don't have any quotations. Doesn't matter.
One question from Mrinalini. How can we apply an interdisciplinary approach like psychology or socialism, yet make it into a literary paper?
That is difficult because you have to take an interdisciplinary approach. And using an interdisciplinary approach, you have to decide whether you want it to be a sociological document or a literary document. Are you doing this research with respect to English or with respect to social sciences or sociology? And there are some universities that are very, very clear about these guidelines. If you are if you are in the English discipline and you want a degree in English, then your analysis or your work, even if it is English, even if it is interdisciplinary, has to have that founding principle of your discipline.
One question from Geeta. How can we identify the Scopus journals?
Oh, it's almost time, no, Kalai?
Yes, ma'am.
12
So I
o'clock.
think this is the last question. How can we identify the
Okay.
Scopus journals?
All of us are struggling with Scopus journals and the net, nothing else. I mean, we can't do anything else beyond this at this point. Please go to the net and identify the Scopus journals, and you will get it.
Ma'am, this is the last question, I think, from one of the participants. How many review of literature need to be written in a research paper?
There is no particular number of literature reviews, everything pertinent to your topic or your argument should be reviewed. Everything that has been said about that particular the narrow topic that you have spoken about, not overall or a generalized idea, because we need to find out the gap. So reading for, reading against, reading in the grain and against the grain, all that has to be integrated.
Participants, do you have any more questions?
Probably they can give it in writing, mail it to me, and then I can answer.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, if possible, please circulate the PPTs to the concerned people.
My PPT is already with Mrs. Kalaivani.
So
Yeah,
kindly she should circulate it to the yeah, please, please.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Somebody, I have submitted feedback from. I'm in the series now, and I have not seen the feedback form. Please resend it, please. Feedback link.
Okay, okay, sir. We will send the link again.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. It will be so kind of you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So it is the time for us to give the vote of thanks. So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Saurashtra College, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly or indirectly supported me to conduct this webinar. At the outset, I thank our resource person, Dr. Annie Kuriachan, for she has given a clear insight on the formation of the thesis statement, and she has given us a clear, elaborative and elucidate ideas on how a research paper should be. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm very much thankful to our Honorable Secretary for his motivation. I'd like to thank our principal for his enthusiastic support, and my heartfelt thanks to all the participants. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Kalaivani, and I would like to thank the entire Saurashtra College and also all participants. So many questions, my God! If we had more time, we could have answered. We could have taken more questions. So research is very exciting. So just go ahead fearlessly.
Where can
Thank
we
you,
have
ma'am.
please, ma'am? Where can we have the PPT?
PPTs. By this evening or by tomorrow morning, I'll send you the PPTs.
Through email?
Yeah, through email. I'll send the PPTs through email.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
So I can leave the meeting, Kalai?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ma'am, one more thing. Actually, we do not remember. Lots of webinars are going on that whether we attended the earlier webinar of Saurashtra College or not. So, what should we take there? Yes or no? It is the question given in the feedback link.
Pardon, I don't